Greetings. I'm Father John Wargel, and it's my privilege to work together with you through the prophets. The prophets, they were the most amazing men that had ever lived and walked this earth before Christ and the apostles. These men grew out of a culture absolutely unique in the ancient world, the Israelite culture, where God entered into covenant. God the Almighty, the transcendent God, entered into covenant with a people, the people Israelite, and a covenant, a kinship bond that's sealed by an oath that the transcendent God would enter into an intimate kinship relationship with the people. That is what covenant's all about. And God has always been faithful to his covenant, but the history of Israel is one where Israel continually became unfaithful to the covenant, and the prophets acted as God's prosecuting attorneys, okay, in prosecuting the case that God had against his people. And these men, because they came face to face with God, they were unafraid. They walked this earth as giants, and everything about their life is shocking. Isaiah and Micah, right off the bat, at the beginning of their prophecies, we see the language of the courtroom, okay? The high drama of God's Yahweh's court, where he calls heaven and earth to witness against his people. I don't know if you've ever been in a courtroom, but when the judge walks in, it's an awesome thing, and so it is. Hosea starts out incredibly shocking. God instructs him to marry a lewd woman. Now, this woman would not be a prostitute in the sense that we understand it, but it was probably a woman who's given herself over to pagan fertility rites because she has believed, or family believed, that if you go to the pagan temples, you'll become fertile. And they were trusting in these pagan deities like Baal and the Ashtoreth rather than Yahweh. And so God allows Hosea to experience what he himself experiences. This is with his own people. It's called a symbolic action. You'll see throughout the prophets that there are symbolic actions because we don't necessarily hear very well words. And so the prophets played like a game of charades before everyone so that they would see it acted out. Okay. And then they would ask questions. You see, it's very vivid. Everything in the prophets is very vivid. Joel starts out with a horde of locusts, like we wouldn't know what that's like, but in the ancient Near East, a horde of locusts could descend and just darken the sky. And before them, there's the greenery of gardens and orchards and what have you. And then within hours, as they pass through and they eat their way through, everything is barren, and people would then be in danger of starvation. I mean, this shocking imagery. And then in the second chapter, as he sees this phenomenon. He has a dream, and in this dream or in this vision, he sees this um, these locusts, this horde of locusts, turning into an apocalyptic army of monsters. Okay, and um, uh, forecasting the destruction of Israel. Very vivid. Amos starts out with the roar of a lion. Okay. Um, Years ago, where I was raised up in Lansing, Michigan, there was a park just over a mile from our house. And back in the 50s, before there was a lot of traffic noise and what have you, you could actually hear the lions roaring at dinner time for a mile away. But you can imagine what it's like in the ancient world where they weren't in zoos. You know, you could walk out your front door and you could be met with a lion. And the roars would be bone chilling. Okay. It was terrifying. Yahweh roars like a lion from Zion. You got to take note. And Ezekiel is probably the most amazing beginning to the book. He sees a storm cloud coming out of the north, which is not a direction. In the ancient world, that would have been understood to be a place of absolute quality. That is, Yahweh is breaking through from the spiritual realm into the physical realm, and it takes the form of um, you've seen pictures of tornadoes, haven't you? How awesome they come and they're roaring, you know, and there's lightning and within this cloud, he sees that there are four creatures, okay, and each has four heads, and one of a man, one of a lion, one of an ox, and one of an eagle, and um, between them is this fire, this unearthly fire, um, and the roar of their wings, and um, beside them are these wheels, these giant wheels with eyes like a gyroscope, you know, with eyeballs in it. And what it really is you see that they're not in a line, but they're in like the wheels of a four-wheeled chariot. And it's God's divine chariot. And above their heads is what the Hebrew calls a rakia, which is like an expanse that God created creation. It's cosmic in scope. And above that, we see the throne of God Almighty. You have to use your imagination and enter into this vision to understand the rest of the book of Ezekiel, because this vision comes and haunts the prophet um, throughout. And I guess that's what we could say about these prophets. They were God haunted. Okay, God visited them in their dreams and in their visions, and they couldn't get away from Yahweh. And for them, Yahweh was what was real, and their oracles speak to this. The prophets, true, can be hard to understand, and we're going to work through that in this class. But these oracles are full of the reality of the transcendent God coming to present his case before the people. You know, it's like a covenant, a lawsuit. We're going to get to the word reeve in Hebrew, which is, but it's not just judgment. God comes also to paint a vision for the end of the world, because the prophets knew that God was almighty, and no matter how sinful Israel is, that God's plan is not going to be thwarted. Okay, and there's going to be a restoration of creation. But let me just tell you a little bit about a book that I suggested that you read. You don't have to read this. You can see in your syllabus and in your reading requirements that I've added this book by Abraham Heschel, who happens to be a rabbi. He wrote a classic book, The Prophet. And he just has a lot of gems in here. I mean, his insight is incredible into the prophets. But in the first volume, toward the end, on page 188, this is so descriptive of what you're going to be reading. What baffles the prophet is the disparity between the power and impact of God and the immense indifference, unyieldingness, sluggishness, and inertia of the heart. God's thunderous voice is shaking heaven and earth, and man does not hear the faintest sound. The Lord roars like a lion. His word is like fire, like hammer, which breaks the rock in pieces. And the people go about unmoved, undisturbed, unaware. What to the prophet is like the sun piercing the thickest clouds remains unnoticed by the people. It was a major enigma that confronted the prophet. How is it possible not to see the majesty of the Lord, not to sense that the whole earth is full of his glory, not to understand God's sign in the happenings of history? What we call the irrational nature of man, they called hardness of heart. So anyways, all this just sort of, to introduce myself to you and get the course started a bit. And God bless you, and bless us all. And may our lives be changed profoundly by our encounter with the prophets and our work together.